Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're watching us from. This is the Trinity Show here on West Nile TV with me, Trinity Peace Gorondru, as your host. And I hope you had a very blessed week. I hope things have been well for you and things have worked out for you. So today, we are going to have a very interesting discussion, and that is on under the segment Refugee Voices. We'll be discussing what are the ways of which we can empower the refugees and promote, especially on the area of peace. You know, recently there's been a lot, not even recently, over time there's been an issue of conflict among the refugee communities and even with the host communities. So what can we do to empower the refugees, and especially on the area of peace? And I'm so happy and very honored to introduce our guest for today, Mr. Shem Luate. You are most welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm so honored to have you here today. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Dear viewers, my name is Luate Shem Henry. I'm a refugee who is residing in Ochia. See, that's Rhino Refugee Settlement. And I'm happy to be hosted by you, Trinity, this day. Thank you.
Yeah, and as I got to know, you are the programs manager of Youth Social Advocacy Team. What does Youth Social Advocacy Team do exactly?
Thank you very much. Youth Social Advocacy Team is one of our refugee-led organizations, of course, started by youth. That was way back in 2017. I remember when the war broke out in 2013, we had a lot of displacements from South Sudan. So we as youth, we went to Uganda, and in Ochea, we had youth groups. That, of course, had nothing. By 2015, 2016, there was completely nothing. So as youth, we thought of coming together to do something that could empower us, as youth. So our main target was to come up with an initiative of peace building, because we realized it was because of lack of peace in South Sudan. That's why we are not able to remain in that country. And we are basically displaced because of lack of peace. So the first idea that came in our mind is to come up with an initiative that will promote peace among refugees and between the refugees and the host community. So basically that is the genesis of Youth Social Advocacy Team, which is based in Rhino Refugee Settlement.
Yeah. So you cannot talk about West Nile region without talking about the refugees. And we cannot also talk about how we can promote socio-economic transformations in West Nile without talking about the refugees, because refugees have been part of West Nile region for quite some time now. And there's a long history, there's a long history between West Nile, because we are at the border. So we are so happy to have you. You're representing the refugee community from the different areas where they are. So can you tell us your story, your refugee story, how you came to Uganda, and the story in general?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Trinity. It's a very long story, viewers, about myself. I will just trace this back to the time I was born. I was born 3 years after the breakout of war, which was in 1983. So when the SPLA took arms against the government of Sudan, so that was 1983. And the 3 years after that, that was the year I was born. So I was born in the war in a small town called Yei Town. Some of you might have heard of that. I was in Yei for only 6 years. So at my 7th age, we had to be displaced from Yei. We moved to a bush where we lived for 4 years. And then my mother, of course, women are fast thinkers. My mother thought of how long should we continue to be in the bush? And given that all facilities were not there were no schools, no health centers, no markets, no roads. So she thought of an idea of bringing us to Uganda. So the first time I became a refugee was in 1994. I was taken to Bidibidi Refugee Settlement in December. I remember we celebrated Christmas under trees. That was a Christmas I will never forget in my life. We were in Bidibidi until 1997, when there was an insurgency. I think there was an issue of armed activity around Bidibidi. So we were also displaced from Bidibidi Refugee Settlement. We had to move back to South Sudan, where I settled for a very short time. And that time, the war was still waging. The Khartoum government was still fighting the SPLA. There was a lot of aerial bombardment. Actually, what chased me back again the second time was the aerial bombardment. Even in Ye town where I was, there was serious aerial bombardment. You could go to the market, just out of the blue, you find an Antonov comes across you and bombards the market. When people gather in churches, they bombard churches. So that also forced me to come back in 1999. That was the time I was taken to Mvepi. And that was my second time to be a refugee. So I was in 1999. I was in Mvepi refugee settlement up to 2005. So that was when the comprehensive peace agreement was signed and the for peace in South Sudan. So we moved it back to South Sudan. We lived until 2010 when we had our elections. Then 2011 when we had our referendum. Then immediately 2013 there was again another war. So in that war we were just displaced within South Sudan. But now the war of 2016 spilled all over. So it affected us in a we had to move again. So this is now my third journey to Uganda as a refugee. So I spend actually much of my time in refugee life. So how I came here was not an easy thing. It was not like how I came the first time, how I came the second time. Because the third time was now based on my decision, my individual decision. I had to decide to come alone. Because this got me when I was already married. Of course, I have a very beautiful lady who is with me at home. We have 4 children. So I had to decide as the head of the household to move the family to Uganda. And that was a time when movement was very difficult. You had to walk over a very long distance for you to access a road so that you could catch a car that will bring you up to the border. So we came to the border, we reached Keri using our own means. Then we were brought to we were finally put where we are. So that is how actually I made my refugee life for the third time.
Yeah, a very, very touching story there. And today, this topic is very, very important. So if you're a refugee out there, or you're someone who, like myself, who has refugees in his or her own circles, and sometimes I even forget I'm a Ugandan because I have so many friends and even family who are refugees. So in case you are one, this is something that is very important that we are discussing today. And you can please join the discussion on the comment section. You can join the discussion on the things that we are going to talk about, and your inputs are they'll be very much welcome. And you can also share it widely because we are going to discuss things that are very helpful. It could be helpful, and someone in your timeline could find it very great. So going straight away to our main point of discussion today, we are going to discuss. You're going to discuss with us, some of just an overview of the challenges faced by the refugee, communities. They are part of our communities currently, but then we cannot say that the same things that we are going through are the exact same things that they are going through. There could be some, differences here and there. So what are those challenges that you feel the different stakeholders who are watching this, the relevant stakeholders, like what the things that they should really pay attention to? What are those challenges faced by the refugee communities?
I know it may be based on our local context. Of course, there are a lot of settlements all over. But as a refugee, I think we may have the same context. I think the most pressing challenge that every refugee will talk about is the issue of the reduced food ratio. At the beginning of April this year, there was a very sharp reduction in the food ratio that refugees get. Previously, we had 2 classes. We had 100%. Of course, those were new arrivals. Then there were those ones who are not all 100%. So at a certain time, all refugees were taken to 100%, meaning you get all the entitlements that are given by the World Food Program. But now at the beginning of April, due to acute funding shortage, World Food Program came out loudly to tell refugees that they had little funding to cater for refugees' needs up to the end of the year. So what was feasible was to reduce the ration by 30%. So now you see somebody who used to get 12.6 kilograms of cereals, that could be maize or sorghum, now gets 8.82. Somebody who was initially getting 3 kilograms of beans or cowpeas now gets 2.1. Then oil was reduced from 0.9, almost a liter, kgs, to 0.6. Then cooking oil, salt was also reduced badly. So now that reduction in food ration has affected the refugees a lot. Given that a lot of things are missing in their life, they have lost a lot of assets, they have lost jobs, and a lot of issues that we'll also continue to discuss. You find that the little food that is given hardly reaches the end of the month. Like those who are getting cash, because in other settlements, World Food Program gives food in form of cash. So you're given 22,000 per month. So now if you spread this 22,000 in Ghana cedis per month, how much do you consume per day?
Less than 1,000.
So meaning a refugee is supposed to eat less than 1,000 in a day. So you find that the reduction in food ration is one of the key challenges that is affecting refugees all over the country. Yeah. Then another challenge that I've witnessed and I've gone through is the use of farmland. With the reduction of the ratio, one could have something to supplement from maybe crop production. You could have land so that you cultivate, because most of these refugees are farmers. When you look back into their history and so on, like where I come from, we are predominantly farmers. So most of the refugees are farmers, and they could cultivate for themselves, they could raise food for themselves. But because there's no farming land completely, there's no land where you can use for rearing animals, there's no land that you can use for other agricultural activities, that you can raise maybe sorghum, you can raise maize. So you find that, again, this affects refugees negatively, because your hands are just tied. You cannot move around and get land, because what you are given is 20 by 20. And out of this 20, you need a toilet, you need a house. I have children, I have to put a house for my children. I have dependents, I have to put a house for my dependents. So look at that 20 by 20 patch, a small patch of land given to you by the government of Uganda. It really can't allow you to do much of. Then another challenge that is very pressing, that I've experienced in the camp, is the medical services that are offered. Some of the services the medical centers are very far. You find the whole zone. A zone may be having 20 villages, others 14 villages, others 6 villages. And these villages, the settlement pattern is a little bit sparse. So you find a zone has only one health facility. Somebody has to move over 7 kilometers to go to access medical service. But now a sick person can't walk over that distance. And we don't have support vehicles or tricycles or any other means of transport that can move such people to the health facilities. Then the other challenge connected to health facilities, sometimes you go and you spend the whole day almost. You have serious issues, people are many, and there are very few health personnel who will attend to those who come, maybe those who are on duty, who come to serve the persons of concern. So realize you go in very early at around 7, or maybe you'll be attended to at 1. And as a sick person, you don't know what you're going through all this time. Okay? So sometimes you even go and come back. So the issue of funding has also affected the supply of the drugs. So I find sometimes, most times, our colleagues complain, you go there, you're diagnosed for malaria, they give you maybe 3 paracetamol tablets. Then somebody tells you take 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, then 2 in the evening. But now you're giving me 3 tablets. And you're saying take 2, 3 times. Where will you get the extra? So sometimes it's a little bit hard when it comes now to the health facilities, and it affects the refugees a lot. We also have issue of educational facilities. I would just want to start with the secondary schools. Yeah. You find over a very big settlement, there may be 1 or 2 secondary schools only. And every year, a primary school, there are a lot of primary schools within the settlements. And every year, we have students who complete their primary education and want to transit to the secondary education. So we realized that because of limited secondary schools, most of our friends, most of our brothers, most of our sisters all end in primary schools and get now engaged in non-academic issues. And that's why sometimes we now enter into issues which will maybe I'll present in the next challenge that is coming. The only difference I've seen here is a lot of money is being invested in constructing ECDs, these early childhood development centers. A lot of money. When you move around the settlement, you'll see the best facility, the best educational facility is a facility for these children from 3 years maybe to 6 years. So it beats my understanding as to why partners or organizations are investing a lot of resources in these ECDs, whose outcome, of course, I don't say that level of education is not important. But now when you look at the secondary education, which is supposed to be a transition into colleges or maybe universities or maybe higher institutions, where now you produce the person you want, but a lot of resources are invested at this lowest level, yet somebody who can be prepared and become somebody as soon as possible is left out. Is left out. So this has also worsened the situation with the lockdown. Schools are opening, like practically on the 15th, when I visited one of the schools. Of course, there are 197 candidates, and the classrooms are very few, and teachers are very few. So according to the SOPs, in this COVID-19 era, there are supposed to be 15 students only per classroom. And the calculation was done that in that school, they need 40 teachers. Now here again, you begin to wonder, where are we going to get the 40 teachers? Given that the serious funding issues. So the issue of education is really key in the refugee settlements. Then we have also issues to do with water. I mean, water for domestic use, not special drinking water. Yeah, a lot of organizations have really done much. They have given a lot of water facilities. These days, I see a lot of solar-powered water systems all over. But now, because of the mechanism or because of the dynamics of the operation of the solar power system, you find that it depends on the sun intensity. So sometimes you'll stay from morning up to around 4 without water completely, simply because they say the system is still pumping water, it's still filling the tank. So sometimes they release water within 3 hours only. And if you don't struggle and get water within that short time, again, you will not have water for the rest of your day. So we still see there is still water crisis. Then some of the water facilities, some of the water points are very far from some individuals. You know, the way we are settled, the settlement parties doesn't care whether you're PSN, whether you're disabled, whatever your social status, whether your physical ability or disability, doesn't care. So sometimes somebody may be put in a location, but the water point is very far from the person. So there is really difficulty. There's a practical difficulty in accessing water points. Then another pressing issue is a clean source of energy. You know, when you're given food, yes, World Food Program gives us food. It gives us maize, grains, gives us beans, sometimes cowpeas, gives us a lot of things that can help us to sustain our living. But now we have to cook. And for us to cook, we need a source of energy. We need fuel. And the traditional people normally use firewood. But now we don't have a clean source of energy. And in an attempt to maybe access firewood, you know, this firewood is out of the areas gazetted for refugees. So sometimes it becomes very difficult for refugees to access. If you go to areas like Invepe, even if you go to Bidibidi, it's really hard for people to access the traditional source of energy. So that is another challenge that we have. Then with now the heavy rains, with the heavy downpours these days, our roads, most of the roads have become very inaccessible. Some of the rivers which don't have bridges are overflooded. So like there's a river for you to access Omogo from Ofua. When it rains, you don't deliver any service to the other side. And somebody who is on the side of the river doesn't cross. So most of our roads have become very impassable. Like sometimes it affects even delivery of food, commodities. Like when it is distribution time, some of the roads become completely impassable. Then we also have high rates of employment, more especially within the lockdown. Many people have lost their jobs because of
The results.
because of the results of the lockdown. And there are people, yes, who have not got jobs simply because they are not considered. You know, there's something that I don't understand in our context as refugees. In most cases, it's hard for us refugees to get jobs. The only job you can get is a voluntary job. They just say you can work as a volunteer. You know, most of us, as you heard from my story, I started my primary one here in Uganda. That was in Bidibidi, 1995. That was when I started my P1. I completed my senior 6 year in Vara, in Arua. Maybe it was only the university education which took me back to South Sudan, where I had my course. But now, when you're here in Uganda as a refugee, sometimes it becomes difficult for somebody to accept your documents, simply because of that status of being a refugee.
Maybe,
so you realize that we can have the same qualification with somebody who is within the community, but because of my status as a refugee, you will be placed as a volunteer, but somebody will be given a position of a staff. So we have a lot of graduates. We have a lot of people who have the knowledge and the skills, who can even execute the expectation. And most of them completed in Uganda. Okay. Most of them studied their universities in Uganda. They have their documents of Ugandan background. But because of being a refugee, you can hardly access a job, more special as a staff. Practically, we have teachers who are even diploma holders, but they are put as classroom assistants. You're a teacher who graduated maybe from one of the schools, one of the institutions in Arua, but you find yourself being put as a classroom assistant simply because you're a refugee. So sometimes the unemployment among refugees is not because they don't have the knowledge or skills or experience, but it's because people misunderstand. So people just misunderstand maybe your social status, maybe where you are. So this is one of the challenges that I've seen, and this is why actually some people, when they're here, they almost give up. Like where I am. If this was a position that was within an organization, maybe that is managed maybe by a UN agency or whichever, it's hard to attain that position. But now you have looked at how we have demonstrated our capacities. Okay, like where we have engaged ourselves as youth, where we have empowered ourselves as youth, where we have executed projects that are even that are funded by some of these agencies. Like Youth Social Advocacy Team has right now a project that is funded by World Food Program. Okay, and we report directly to them. So you've seen how we have tried to expose our potentials. And then another serious issue that is affecting our social being is the issue of early marriage. More especially teenage pregnancy within is either intentional or unintentional. So you have realized within the lockdown there are a lot of cases of teenage pregnancies. Maybe this results from the idleness of our children, because this is from 15, trying to look at for 15 to 17 years. Girls in this age bracket, I think, are being taken off very prematurely when they are not aware of what they're supposed to do in their lives, simply because of now the current situation. The restrictions of lockdown, the close of schools, and so on. So this is one of the pressing issues that's affecting refugees. So when you move around, you hear, like where I come from, you see every maybe 2 weeks, you hear a girl has gone. A girl is impregnated, maybe has gone to somebody. And this is normally done by sometimes responsible people or some of the boys who are also within that age bracket. And then maybe the last thing I would like to talk about here is within the settlement, we have persons of concerns, or we have refugees who have cases related to registration. Registration. When people came from South Sudan, we didn't come, most people did not come as a family. Sometimes you find the husband is in Juba, the wife is in Yei, or in Torit, or whichever part of South Sudan. But sometimes you realize the children were in Uganda. So when the war broke out, the children came alone. Maybe the wife came alone, and the husband also came phone his own way. So now, these people are right now not together, simply because they could not access the registration easily. There is a way they could be merged, like family unification could be done. Then all these are merged. So within the settlements, we have these cases. We have people who are right now scattered simply because they cannot be together. Why can they be together? It's because your food, the food ration that you get, is where you are registered. So like if your wife is in Rhino camp, and you as a husband, you're in Bidibidi, you cannot be in Rhino camp throughout because you have to move to Bidibidi to bring your food. But now you heard from the quantities that I talked about, the little food quantity that is given. So right, it is very hard for you to get border from Rhino camp and go up to Bidibidi to get your food, to get the 12.6 or the 8.8 2 kilograms of maize, so that you come to Rhino camp. So we have those cases which are really pressing. Now this has actually impacted on the consumption rate of food at home, because people who are forced themselves to be together now consume the food of those who are legally registered in that settlement. So if you have not moved your food, meaning you will now eat food of others who are here. Then we also had some people who arrived during there are people who moved during the lockdown. Those are the term that spontaneous arrivals. They don't have any registration status. But because some of them are relatives, we have tried to accommodate them. But right now they don't have any food to eat. So they depend on us. And this again impacts negatively on the quantity of food that we get. Then we have the newborn babies, with the lockdown procedures and so on. So some of the centers that we could access so that these children are added are closed. So we have children within our settlements, we have children within our zones, within our villages, who are not in the food log. Meaning, when there's food distribution, they don't get their entitlements. So these are some of the categories of people who have. The last group is people who want to transfer. Maybe who want to change the address, from one settlement to another, for many reasons that they know. Because as human beings, people know why they want to be in one location. But this has also become difficult. So these are some of the registration-related concerns that affect the refugees, actually, which create some of these problems that we see. The food is not enough at home, or maybe other issues that arise. Thank you.
Wow, that is very, very, it's very detailed, and it's very heartbreaking. Not having the authority. Okay, when you're not in your own country, there is so much that you're limited to. And with all these challenges, it is very hard to see, socioeconomic transformation in the camps. We cannot talk about, development or, trying to see some change, even in the status, when some of these things are not addressed. So, as this is something that is very interactive, from all these challenges, this has just been an overview. Of course, we are going to break this down and handle them, challenge by challenge. We shall give them specific days, but then it being an overview for today, what do you think about these challenges? If you're out there, you're a refugee, or you are a stakeholder, somehow you have an input. What do you think about these challenges that our brother here shared with us? What can be done to empower the refugees? As we'll be getting, shortly, we'll be getting there. You can also, start contributing so that we, discuss this whole thing together. Now, specifically on the challenges faced by the refugees, there's something that really caught our attention, as with Nile TV. There's not even recently, over time, in these years that have passed even, there's been an issue of conflict, among the refugees and the host community, or even between the refugee, among the refugee communities themselves. You find one community fighting the other, burning houses. Others have even resulted into death. We've had cases where people have been killed, people have been stabbed because of so many reasons, So this is directly connecting to peace building. Yeah. The reason why the refugees are here in Uganda is directly as a result of conflict in the different countries in Congo and in South Sudan. So you find that it's very absurd if it's very, very absurd if you find that someone leaves South Sudan very healthy, they have escaped the war from there, they have left Congo and have come to Uganda for refuge. But then they end up here being killed as a result of conflict within Uganda, where they have come to get refuge from. So we'll be getting back shortly. After this short break, we'll be getting back to discuss peace building in the refugee camps. So thank you and stay tuned. Yeah, we are back from the break, and thank you for keeping it up here with us. So just like we had communicated earlier, we are going to, in this session, we are going to concentrate on peace building. We'll be talking about the conflicts that have been going on and what can be done to promote peace among the refugee settlements and also with the host communities. What can be done, to mitigate these conflicts that have been going on. So what is going on, in regards to the conflict, that the different conflicts that have been happening? Why do you think there is so much conflict going on? The recent one here in Rhino Camp, I don't know how many people, I even had people were killed.
Yeah.
And even I remember there was one, I think it was last year or early this year, the one in Palorinya, where houses were burned and all that. And even previously, I think last year in Ajumani, there was also conflict with the host community. And what do you think causes these conflicts?
Okay, thank you very much, Trinity. It is very unfortunate that we are talking about conflicts now where we have come to soak refuge. It's really very unfortunate because our idea of being in a refugee settlement is actually to have refuge. Okay, meaning we want to be protected from conflicts. And the protection doesn't start with the secondary party. It starts with you as a primary party.
Yeah.
So you are supposed to accord yourself the first protection. And in that context, you are supposed to actually not engage in any situation that creates conflict. But now what we are seeing is completely different. What we are seeing is completely different, and it's not what we have been thinking about as refugees. It is really very unfortunate that we find ourselves sometimes already in conflict among ourselves as refugees. We have, as you said, there's conflict among refugees themselves. Then there are also conflicts between refugees and the host. Okay, let me first say a few things on the conflicts that are among the refugees themselves. There are two driving forces here. One is the issue of our cultural practices. South Sudan is one of the countries that is very rich in cultural diversity.
Yeah.
A lot of tribes are in South Sudan. I think South Sudan has 64 tribes. And if you move across all these settlements, you'll find most of these tribes are there.
Yeah.
If you go to a settlement like Rhino, you'll come across over 20 tribes. Now, all these tribes have come with their own practices. Their norms are there, their practices are there, they have their limits. They know where to start and where to end. But now, because of this mixing that we are in, you realize that sometimes what I do, somebody doesn't want. And practically, we have the issue of a boy-girl or man-woman relationship. So we have seen one of the main cause of conflicts actually intermarriages. Okay, some tribes do not easily give their ladies to others. In marriage. They completely don't want. So once they hear that one of their daughters or a girl from their tribe has got a man in the other tribe, they rise against and they fight. So when you hear of most of the fightings in a Rhino camp, like in Odobu zone, Odobu 1, when you go to Simbili, you go to Wanyange, you come to Ochea, you come to Agulupi, All those ones were as a result of our cultural differences. And these are all attributed to marriage. So this is one of the key areas that if we, as refugees, try to change our perception on marriage, and we look at what marriage is and what marriage brings to us. Actually, marriage is supposed to bring unity.
Unity, yeah.
Because the two are getting united. And once the two are united, the two families get united. And when the two families get united, the two clans get united. And when those clans get united, the whole communities get united. Then at the end of the day, you find regions get united. Even nations get united. So this is one thing that I've seen. It has really contributed negatively to our well-being in the refugee settlements and has caused a lot of insecurity. Some people have moved away. Like if you are in the family of the boy, and it so happened that your family is attacked because your boy has gone out to meet a girl from the other tribe, then definitely you have to move away, because if you don't move away to avoid the conflict, then again conflict will get you there and may lead to like what you said. Yes, people are killed. People are killed, people are beaten unconscious simply because of the limitations we have when it comes to our culture. Another big component of this conflict is on the issue of resources. There are those natural resources that we get in the settlement. Then there are those resources that are provided by some of the organizations. Let me start with the natural resources that we have, like water. Okay, previously I talked about water being one of the challenges that is facing the refugees. So we again have conflicts that arise at water points. It can start with the displacement of a jerrycan. Just you put a jerrycan aside. So a child will run home, will say, so and so pushed my jerrycan away. Then the mother will come. They will say, why did you push the jerrycan away? You see, heat begins to be generated. Then from there, sometimes men come in. So the whole community is set in conflict. Simply because at the water point, people are struggling to get water. And this is a natural resource that God has given us, and we could use it meaningfully. Okay. Then we have the issue of land. You know, the land is very small, and it limits our engagement in some of the livelihood activities. So I find this small land that we have, if there is small land that is within the gazetted areas, of course we know not that everybody are settled in the in the settlement. Some people are out of the settlement, or some people have got plots, but they have decided to be together. So there are some small areas that are left. So now everybody is eyeing that small plot. So sometimes, because all of us want to get a small land and we want to put crops there, we want to raise vegetables so that we can supplement our food. So sometimes we find disagreement arises. Then we have the services. We have the health services. We have the educational services. Most of the facilities are very few for us as refugees. So because of the few facilities that are needed by very many people, so I find that there's competition. Okay, there's even in the class. In the class, you find that the class size is small. But because everybody wants his child to be in a class, as a teacher, you cannot say there's no space. Okay, because if you tell me there is no space, I will say, okay, why are you favoring so and so? If so and so's child is in class, why not my child? And yet, the resource cannot allow. Okay, so this again brings this, mistrust among refugees, and it sometimes causes conflicts. Then we also have issue of animals. You know, there are some livelihood partners that give animals to refugees, to us, like goats. Right, they give you chickens, they give you goats, or even cattle. Yeah, if you move around, some of the farmers' groups have got cattle. So sometimes these animals can go astray. Now, when these animals go astray and destroy crops of other refugee members, so I find that the person whose crops are destroyed sometimes may take it the other way. Okay, may take it the other way, and it may cause conflict. The practical example is what happened in Tika. What happened in Tika that led to the death of about 15 people was from to a refugee farm, and they ate the crops. So we have pigs that sometimes are hard to control. So sometimes you're in your house, now you find a pig has maybe run from its house and has moved to the farm and it destroyed. So in the morning, if you don't have the heart that you can go to your neighbor or you can go to the owner to present your case. So sometimes people become emotional and it causes conflict. Then one thing that beats my understanding much is the issue of trauma. You know, when people left South Sudan, they never left in peace.
In peace, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they never left in peace. So people have come here with the hearts that are wounded, broken hearts,
Wounded, yeah.
hearts that have scars. And each time they see the scars, they feel like for this scar. So this has caused a lot of arrogance. A lot of arrogance. People have become harsh. So any slight thing, any little misunderstanding, you find people flare up into conflict. So the last thing is ignorance of the law. Of course, if you don't know the law, you may think you are the final person. So people take things easy and they just decide to take the law to their hands. And by so doing, they are causing conflict. I think these are some of the key areas that I've seen that have caused a lot of conflicts among the refugees themselves.
Yeah. Now, getting back to the host, that is among the refugees.
Yeah.
Now, what about the ones with the host?
Yeah, among the coast, most of them are just related. Yeah, most of them are just related. Like the issue of the cultural practices. Yeah, most of the nationals don't know our cultures. Yeah, because we have just met. We have just met newly and they don't know what I like and I don't know what they like. They don't know what I not like and I don't know what they don't like. So that mixing alone makes somebody, because we have a saying that one man's meat is another man's poison. So that is actually one cause of the conflict. Then we have also the same resources we're talking about, the land issue. The refugees, in most cases, say they can go and negotiate with the nationals or the host. They give you land. Maybe some of them can give you freely, say, maybe for one season, you cultivate, raise something and give to your children. Or sometimes they say give something little. In most cases, it's from 80 to 120,000 Ugandan shillings per acre, per season. So when you clear this land, sometimes even before harvesting, the owner claims it back. Or they just wait for, after clearing the bush, they claim the land back. So that has been one of the causes, I think. Then the issue of firewood is because it's a no-go zone for refugees. But sometimes refugees really try to raise something for themselves so that they can have food on the table. Because if you don't have firewood, there will be no food on the table. So some of the refugees attempt maybe to go and get firewood from the bushes. So when they are formed there, I think causes also some conflict. Like what happened in Bidibidi. I think some children, 3 children ran away. They are not known where they went until they are discovered. They ran from Zone 1 up to Yoyo. 3. Simply because they were in the bush for firewood, but when they met the landlords, they had to run for their lives. Yeah. Then the same thing also, we have the services that are provided by the partners or by the government. You know, there are services which are directed to refugees only. Then there are services which are shared. So sometimes when the nationals don't receive the services the way the refugees receive, they also begin to question as to why this is happening. Okay? Because sometimes they say 30% is supposed to be given to the nationals. Refugees go with 70%. So when this is not met, sometimes it causes conflict between. So instead of maybe going to the people who are offering the service, maybe they just come direct to the refugees and say, why are you giving this? This happened, one of the organizations took goats to one of the villages in Rhino Camp. The following morning, people came and say, we want the animals. Why were you giving animals when we are not given? So it's just because of the services that we get from there.
Yeah,
then the same thing of stray animals,
good
like what happened in Tika. Of course, animals of the nationals went to the farm of a refugee, and it caused that problem, which led to the death of the 15. Then, like in other areas, more especially Rhino Camp, the issue of border. Like these newly created district, there is Terego district and Igbo district. So, like where I stay, I even don't know the border between the two districts. We are just like in no man's land. So it becomes difficult sometimes for us to do our engagement. As refugees, we are like at one of the markets, Northia Market. You find people from this district want you to pay taxes. Again, this ones also want you to pay taxes. So it now brings pulling of rope, between the two districts, and you are in the middle as a refugee. So So later on, it becomes difficult. Then there's one thing that we are failing as refugees. We are really failing to understand the agreement between the government and the nationals on the land that is given to the refugees. Because sometimes you can do something, then the landlord will come and say, you see, what you are doing here is not acceptable because this land doesn't belong to you. You know, the government has not given us our portion. So we cannot allow you to do this because of our agreement with the government. It happened in one of the zones, I think, where food distribution, a mobile food distribution point was put. But now, instead of the landlord going to the government, they came to the refugee leaders and said, we don't want your food to be brought here because this is not your place. So those are some of the issues that now cause misunderstanding between the refugees and the host.
And the host community.
Yeah.
So as we've seen, there is so much going on, and I think we need to get some other day to talk about the way forward. Yeah, to talk about what can be done to handle these different cases, ranging from the general overview, the challenges that we've talked about, and then also on the issue of peace. We'll have to get, since time cannot. We've had a very lengthy discussion already, and we've put the challenges forward and the causes of all these. But generally, according to me, I think there is need for sensitization.
Serious
Sensitization on all matters. When you talk about the cultural differences, people need to understand that other people also have their own culture. And how can we live together? How can we, coexist in harmony without letting one culture overtake the other and, trying to cause conflict? So I think you can agree with me that there is so much sensitization that is
needed.
Really needed. Yeah. So Mr. Shem Luate, just very briefly, you can tell us the last things that you want to share with us on the steps to promote peace and also the general challenges.
Yeah, I think looking at all the challenges, I will just sum this in two things. One is looking at what the refugees are supposed to get, more especially food, because most of the challenges arise from the little food they are getting. When you don't have food in your house, you don't have peace. So refugees are really looking at if there's a way of increasing the ration that they are getting, the food ration that they are getting, so that at least they have something in their house that can take them up to the end of the cycle. Okay, these days you get double ration. Sometimes by 15th of the first month, it's over. Even the money is over. So that is one important thing that when it's done, maybe we shall have peace. Two is you look at some of the facilities, like the educational facilities, the health facilities, because health is wealth. Meaning if you are healthy, you'll be wealthy. And again, education is strength. If you're educated, you'll have a lot of strength. So if this is invested to bring peace, then sharing of the resources, the mega resources with the host communities in a very, very reasonable way that everybody understands. As you said, based on sensitization, based on dialogues, I think this will really help us to come up from the conflict. Then maybe organizing some peace building activities, like on have exchange visits. We can even have sports activities that bring the two together, the host communities and the refugees, even among the refugees themselves. We can have dialogue among refugees, dialogue between refugees and host communities. So those are some of the things that when we do, can really help us to move forward.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mr. Shem Luate. It's been very great having you here. And I think we need to pick a day that we need to exhaust, on the ways of empowering the refugees and also the host community and how we can promote peace, because that is very important. We cannot talk about transforming and developing West Nile when among ourselves we cannot, live at peace. And developing, living at peace here can even translate to one day when you get back to the different countries, it will develop even peace, that side. If we can't coexist here, even if we go back to South Sudan, even if we go back to Congo, we fail to coexist.
That's right.
So that is very important. So to the different stakeholders who've been part of this. If you're a refugee, if you are a developing partner, different institutions working with the refugees, and if you're just part of, thank you so much for being part of this discussion, and we hope you picked something. And also, we're going to continue discussion on the comment section. So all your inputs they are welcome, and thank you so much for being part of us today. And with this, we've come to the end of this session. This is something that is very lengthy, and it's something that is very rich, and we'll have other in-depth discussions on it. Otherwise, thank you so much for being part of us. And we've been here at Heritage Court. It's a very beautiful place, and for all your accommodation needs, for all your venue needs, don't forget to check out Heritage Court. And also Fashion Hive. Yeah, Fashion Hive, it's a fashion house here in Arua, just located at the new taxi park for all your fashion and beauty needs. Ladies, you need your dresses, you need your hair, you need makeup and all that. You can also check it out. We shall share with you the contact. Yeah, and also West Nile TV, we have other programs. We have the Saturday Sports every Saturday. We also have the political program, and that is the Pressure Point every Monday. So in case you're a politician out there, this is the political season, and if you want, you can partner with us, and to get your votes, for you to be able to get to your voters. Yeah, we'll be able to give you that leverage. So thank you so much for being part of West Nile TV, and I hope you have the very best of your week. Till we meet again next Sunday.